Today in my presentation, I will give highlights regarding reinsurance and insurance. Thank you. Fine. Thank you very much. I will talk about give highlights regarding the reinsurance and insurance sectors of CE region and the landscape in these two sectors in 2017. Why insurance as well? Because you cannot divide insurance from reinsurance. They are so much connected. And then I will talk about some effective strategies I believe you should concern when you transfer the Netcat risk to reinsurance. So, when we look at CE region, not a surprise, we have a motor-dominant markets across the region. Especially compulsory MTPL-driven markets. This motor branch consists of more than 50% of the premium written in non-life in the total non-life premiums written in the region. When we look at property business, we see its share is not even 15% in 2016. So let's think about the Netcat risk is more below than, I assume it's more below than 15% across the region. So we can say in a way it cannot grow. There are many factors which would affect why property and particularly Netcat insurance cannot maybe grow. For me, one of the main reasons, the main reason is the potential insureds. Potential insureds who are exposed to Netcat peril in the region. They need Netcat coverage. But do they know they need it? Do they buy it if they know it? If they buy, who buys? If not, who doesn't buy? And why not buy? So there are several factors that can affect this buying behavior. One is for me frequency of the loss, Netcat loss. The other is the awareness of the people towards the Netcat peril in their area, and the priority they give to this risk, buying the insurance, insure them, to this risk. But more important is, I believe, the financial situation of the people to buy the insurance for Netcat risk. So here, at this point, when we look at the economic growth of the region, according to latest statistics I checked and the reports in 2016, we see that the region had a slow economic growth, and this slow economic growth was based on increased household consumption. But of course here the question is how much of this consumption was paid for insurance? No, not much. So when we look at the region in the insurance and reinsurance markets in the region, we see on both sides, on both sectors, very soft markets across the region. This is never ending, and it is likely it will not end in 2017 too. So why? There is excess reinsurance capacity, as it is the case overall in the world. So the same as in CE region, there is underpricing of the risk and severe competition we see based on price. So the soft market situation is never ending so far. Another very important, I think, factor in the sector in CE region is the dominance of big group companies. We see the dominance of big group companies across the region, mainly European ones. So they have the premiums, most of the premiums earned, and they pay most of the losses occurred. And we also observe continuous merger and acquisition activities of these big insurance groups across the region, and I assume this will continue in 2017 as well. So, of course, in line with this situation, on the reinsurance side, we see group reinsurance protection more common in the region. And why? Because these group companies obviously reducing their operational costs when they protect the whole group together, and also, of course, they have stronger negotiation power in doing so, for more favorable prices and conditions for their group reinsurance coverage. Another important factor I see across the region, not only CE region actually, in the whole world, across the world, we see changing political and regulatory environment, which is affecting insurance and also reinsurance side. So it is likely the world is shifting from global to regional and national. And the regulations are more protecting their own markets or regional markets. So this shift we observe across CE region as well. And in CE region, what is important, I think, is this change is supporting European Union reinsurers, leaving less room for non-regional players on the reinsurance side. And when we look at this position, we see, we should question, is there diversification in the reinsurance panel in this situation? I will come back to this point in the end of my presentation, because I believe diversification in the reinsurance panel is also important. So with this changing regulatory environment, of course in CE region we see Solvency II, it started to be implemented. Of course, in the process, added administrative burden and cost to insurers, for sure. But in a way, it will strengthen the capital in the markets, in insurance markets, and it will more consolidation is likely to continue in 2017 as well, due to capital due to strengthening the capital with the rules of Solvency II. On the reinsurance side, what is the effect? We see increase in demand for reinsurance because of demand for capital relief solutions insurance companies have. We observe in mainly motor and property branches this demand, like vertical reinstatements, both higher additional layers required, etc. So, after looking at the highlights in CE region, I can come to, in this environment, what are the, so, which way? Okay. Thank you. Yes. So, what are the effective strategies in transferring Netcat risk into reinsurance for CE region? So, of course, this is a very wide subject. There can be several factors, but once you have really effective strategies, this will lead you to buying almost adequate reinsurance coverage with the almost optimum reinsurance cost. So I say almost because nobody is perfect, and there is no certain rule in this. Yes. So, what can we say? For me, first of all, knowing the risk is important. Know your risk. So now I'm in a way talking in the point of view of reinsurance manager, maybe, in an insurance company. So what is the peril? Natural perils. What do we have in the region? We have flood risk across the region and earthquake risk in most countries like Romania, of course. And frequency of this Netcat risk you have is important. You have to take into consideration. But for me, most of all, is the accumulation. To be able to monitor the Netcat accumulation for the insurance company is very important. First of all, for themselves. For themselves, if they sell Netcat insurance. Yes. So, for monitoring the accumulation risk you have, of course, you have the total sum insured of the Netcat risk policies you give this coverage, and total premiums written you write in this respect. But when you put them together as detailed as, it is important to classify this risk, this accumulation, as detailed as possible per zone. But per zone form is not important. It is important to make it as detailed as possible per cities, per villages. Yes, as detailed as possible to see, to monitor your risk, Netcat risk. Where does it accumulate? Which regions? It's important to know, first of all. Per coverage, it's property, industrial, household, in commercial. For engineering, ER, car, loss of profit, per coverage and per building type. Building type is important to monitor the vulnerability of the buildings in your portfolio. So as I said, this is important to know where your Netcat risk accumulates, and as detailed as possible, it will give you an idea, a very good idea, maybe in pricing. And in this respect, we have, of course, Netcat aggregate tables that is helping insurers. So I put in my presentation two examples for property and engineering. So there you can see the accumulation. If in this, maybe this is a good way to see the accumulation, the aggregates of Netcat risk you have in your portfolio per coverage, as I said, per zone, per cities, etc. And also you enforce your current when you have this data. Of course, as big as your portfolio, gathering this data is getting more harder. So we should, of course, mention about the importance of technology in this respect. So when you have your aggregates, when you monitor, of course, to make them more meaningful, when we move towards your coverage, reinsurance coverage, there we have modeling. Modeling of Netcat aggregate data you have in your portfolio will give you expected loss amounts and return period of these expected loss amounts. This is numerically very helpful to see, to have an idea, because you have the total sum insured, but you cannot buy reinsurance coverage for all of them. It would be a coverage, huge coverage. When you buy reinsurance coverage per risk, per risk loss, maximum retention, maximum coverage you give when you write policies. So in one risk loss, you can, of course, have an idea how much loss you will have, and of course, you look at the frequency. But with Netcat, never possible. You never know how frequently, how big, how severe impact it will give to your portfolio. So the hardest part in buying reinsurance coverage for Netcat risk, I think, is this problem or issue or challenge, we can say. So, as I said, while thinking this, of course, modeling results will give you an idea. For earthquake, every 250 years, your portfolio in your portfolio will happen this much estimated loss. You know, we have rules of thumb. I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of rules of thumb. There are certain percentages, guiding. Maybe, in determining the retention levels in reinsurance programs. And in some countries, especially in Latin America, we see that companies are buying Netcat coverages, reinsurance coverages. They are determining their limits as percentage of the aggregates. It can be a percentage of country-wide aggregate, a percentage of peak zone aggregate. So this is also common. But as I said, whatever decision is given, there is always a spillover risk. Because you can, if you buy a coverage higher than you need, you will have higher costs, you will pay more premium. But if you have cost constraints, if you buy lower program coverage, reinsurance coverage, then you may have severe spillover risk. So this is, I think, an important factor to consider while thinking on what kind of coverage you need in reinsurance. Of course, market cycle is important for negotiation, I think, as an example. Because what are your competitors doing? What kind of coverage they have? What price they have, what is going on in your market, and of course, most of all, company strategy. You have your cost in your hand. You have to, you have to think of that while determining the required reinsurance coverage. So it's not an easy job, and I think, yes. And of course, yes. It's not an easy job on that side, but when you determine the reinsurance coverage you need, you maybe proportional, maybe risk and cat excess, whatever you need, on maybe facultative. But on treaty side, I think as important as these decisions to being given is the reinsurance panel. Why? Because when you have the loss, Netcat loss, of course you cannot pay it. It's a high cost for insurance companies. That's why we are buying reinsurance coverage. But on the reinsurance panel, the security list should be as reliable as possible. So forming the reinsurance panel for me is as important as the other factors I talked so far for effective strategies of transfer of risk. So longevity of experience of the reinsurance companies in our panel, are they financially robust, strong, and good, close, long-term relationship, because this will lead you to have the right coverage you need with maybe better negotiation skills. If you have they know you better, you know them better. So I think this is also an important factor. But also, as I said before, as I mentioned before, diversification of the reinsurance companies in your panel per regions across the world is as important as the others, because you never know. Anything can happen anywhere, financially, economically. We are in a very changing environment, as a whole world. We are passing through a hard situation as a whole world. You never know what will happen when. So So how reasonable is it to strict the reinsurance panel with one region or in one nation? You know, that is, I think, should be considered, and a strong thought should be given on that factor as well. Thank you.